Welcome to Senior Stay or Go TV, a show to educate, entertain, and advocate on behalf of our aging adults. We are here to provide you the best information for your quality of life.
Welcome. Our guest today is Brad Messmer. He's a PhD and CEO of Abreos Biosciences. Thank you so much for being with us again today, Brad. We really appreciate you coming back.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, thanks for coming back. It's been about a year and 3 or 4 months. So take us on a journey, what's been going on the last 15 months or so, and tell us about the company and what you really set out to accomplish.
Yeah, so it's been a very exciting 15 months for us. We, of course, are a startup company, which means we're always looking for money, and we recently closed a funding round with some more private individual investors, so we're very excited to have the funding we need to continue on.
Awesome.
If you recall, our company is focused around precision medicine, and in particular, dose monitoring for very expensive drugs that treat cancer, autoimmunity, and other serious conditions.
So what 15 months, when last time we saw you, what's the major, has it been like a major transition, breakthrough, or what's been happened?
Yeah, so the science is progressing, which is good, but what's really been exciting for us is our business development activities, in particular talking to pharmaceutical companies. We've seen a big shift in enthusiasm for personalized medicine and precision medicine approaches such as ours.
Well, that's good news.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So why is dosing so important, and are you going to need to do clinical trials? And if you do, what kind of subjects do you need for those trials? How many sites do you plan on having across the country so people can kind of be aware of where you're going to be?
Yeah, so the reason that dosing is important, particularly with these drugs, so we focus on the class of drugs called biologics, and these are very expensive drugs. A single dose can cost thousands of dollars, and the annual cost of therapy for patients can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's a strong economic reason to try to get the dose right and not take more of these drugs than you need. Some of them have side effects as well, so minimizing side effects is always important. And then the flip side is that some patients actually, their bodies just get rid of these drugs very quickly and they don't work. And so to be on a very expensive drug that's not working is not in anyone's interest. So that's really the core basis for what we're doing. We want to help the patients get the most benefit from these powerful but expensive drugs. And to go to your question of clinical trials, we're now actually starting to set up plans for our first clinical studies for one of the drugs that we're looking at. In general, we can actually offer laboratory tests without clinical trials, without FDA approval, but we ultimately want to have FDA-approved tests.
So I'm going to go a little political, given the controversy with the Food and Drug Administration, given the new administration, or maybe not so new anymore. Where is that, do you see a loosening up of that? Do you see a more advantageous situation, or where do you see that going?
That's a loaded question. So far actually things have not changed very much as far as we can tell. We actually just had a phone call with FDA a couple weeks ago, and it sort of went by the numbers. The agency is very concerned about patient safety and are very careful not to take chances, which can be frustrating at some level because those of us that want to do things right sometimes face a higher barrier than people that can cut some corners and go around. There are some loopholes that one can exploit, but ultimately we think that particularly if we're going to work with pharmaceutical companies who want things to be done right, we'll work with the agency the way that we're supposed to the best of our abilities.
There's a number of pharmaceutical companies in Europe. Are you able to do any research or work with them and maybe move things along a little quicker since they don't have as many FDA regulations as we do?
So that's a great question. Actually, we are working with many of the multinational pharmas. We actually are going to be doing a little clinical study in France. We actually have a subsidiary located in Marseille. So that we have.
Can we come? We'd like to go.
Yeah.
Can we go check that one out?
There are worse places to visit. And in fact, the weather's very similar to San Diego.
Yeah.
So it's easy on us, other than the time difference. But no, generally the Europeans, the big companies conform to European and FDA regulations across the board. So there's not too much of a difference in that sense, although for the economic rationale behind these drugs, the Europeans are definitely generally single-payer markets with national health systems who have to make these hard decisions about what they can afford to provide to their population. And so that's where, again, getting the dosing right and limiting the excessive use of drugs can really bring drugs to those patients that otherwise their health systems wouldn't pay for.
Which is why they might get on board maybe a little quicker.
Yeah, they certainly are driving the desire to have more cost-effective therapies. You know, the UK has some very innovative programs where they essentially ask the drug manufacturers to take on some of the risk even after the drug's in the marketplace to show that, hey, it has to really work as well as it did during the clinical trials, or else you're going to have to pay us back for the drug. So I think they're more pioneers in these kind of health economic models than we are.
So does your is it a product that somebody would digest, or is it a product that somebody, how would it work?
So it's a blood test, and
Okay.
it can work in it can take a number of forms. It could be a laboratory test where blood would be drawn and then sent to a lab, you know, like is done for a lot of other things, but we're also developing point of care solutions so that a finger stick of blood right there in the physician's office could give you the measure of how much drug is there, so that
Just
there
like a
wouldn't.
blood sugar test.
Yeah, the glucose monitoring for diabetes is really the model that we ultimately think is the way to go.
Could somebody do this at home? I mean, obviously not always at the doctor's office, so somebody could do this at home.
Yeah, that's our ultimate goal. Some of these drugs are actually self-injected by patients at home, and so obviously it'd be nice if the test that guides the dosing could be done. We have a prototype device that is Bluetooth enabled. It can talk to the cloud, so the physician could see the information, but the test could be done at home.
Wow.
So being, you know, the whole thing is unbelievably fantastic. What would be any objection? Who would object to something like this?
Well, again, the drug companies have an interest in selling more drug. Now, they are, as I said, they're very concerned about patient safety, and we believe, and I think we're seeing this now, that better drugs are better drugs for everyone, and they will sell more. And these markets are getting competitive, so there's a greater desire to differentiate you know, one drug from another. But there is a history, I think, of trying to make things simple. So traditionally, they like simple dosing. One dose fits all. I mean, take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning, not 2.5 for you and 1.5 for you. But I think that overall now there's a recognition that we can and we should be doing personalized medicine.
Especially with the more costly medications, and you know, if somebody has an autoimmune disease, it's not something that's going to go away in 2 weeks. So you need to get it right over time, or the side effects could be devastating.
Yeah, well, we always say when your therapy costs as much as a Ferrari, it really should have a speedometer.
Yeah,
I like that. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
We'll have to, I don't know, somehow we'll have to use that. So when will you think the first tests, you're saying the first tests are available, or when will they be available?
So
Clinically.
Clinic.
Yeah, so we do have a laboratory test that's ready to launch. We're looking for a laboratory partner with whom we can launch that test, and that would be for the drug Tysabri, which is used in multiple sclerosis. Our first FDA products, we've just initiated that process, so we're probably about 2 years away from the point of care solutions.
And is that's not 510K then? That's
No, it is. It's a 510K. Yeah,
Okay.
Class 2.
Okay.
Okay, what does that mean? She's pretty smart at all this stuff.
It means that there's something similar that they can relate it to that's already on the market versus starting from scratch.
Yeah, in our case, it's actually a de novo 510K because
Okay.
we don't have that precise predicate.
Okay.
But it does mean that we don't, in theory, don't have to show full clinical utility. We only have to show clinical validity, which is
Okay.
again, this is FDA speak. It's basically it says that we're measuring what we're measuring correctly. What you do with that information still ultimately is up to the physician.
So if somebody in the viewing audience has MS, should they contact you?
They're certainly welcome to, and particularly if they're on Tysabri, you know, we can share some information about dosing. And I think, in general, any patient on these drugs should ask their doctor, how do you know that I'm getting the right amount? And in some cases, they may not get a good answer back, but at least creating that awareness among their physicians that they're worried
aware.
about it. And particularly in the personalized medicine space, patients can really drive a lot of the future of how care is going to be delivered.
I mean, are the doctors more, do you sense the doctors are more concerned about this? Is this something the doctors could drive to?
It varies by specialty. I think certainly in neurology for multiple sclerosis, the physicians are very aware of the risks of these drugs and they really want to get it right. So we've actually had them come to us and say, we want this now. You know, in other diseases, particularly in cancer, it depends a little bit on the drugs. Some of them really don't have a history of worrying about precise levels. Sometimes they have bigger problems that they're dealing with. So it's interesting, in fact, how it varies across the different specialties.
Could it even be used for pain management?
Right now, no.
Okay.
The drugs that we measure are not the ones that are used in pain management, but obviously that's an area where people are very concerned about dosing and overdosing, and so we are looking at that.
Got it.
Well, I'll give you a last word. What can we do to support you? I mean, it's just a fabulous product. It just seems like a fabulous thing.
Well, in the short term, just watch our growth and root for us. As I said, the FDA process is time-consuming, and there's not much you can do to shorten that time. But we're always interested in patient stories. Those are very powerful. They help us raise money, but they also help us explain really the ultimate value of these types of tests. So
patient stories being where they were not monitored properly.
Or even if they're just on these drugs and they're worried. The other thing that's going to happen soon is the generic versions of some of these drugs are starting to come out, and so there's a lot of concern. Are they really going to perform the same? And so we're seeing a lot of interest there. So I think any patient who's worried about their drug of this class, we'd be happy to hear from them.
Okay,
Awesome.
you know all about what do you?
I think it's awesome because, I mean, even when when pharma does a clinical trial, they have to set parameters for their subjects. And not everybody is within that parameter. Not everybody is a male or a female between 20 and 35 and, whose metabolism is exactly the same, whose diet is the same, whose exercise program is the same, and yet, like you said, take 2 of these and call me in the morning, and it just doesn't work that way for everybody.
Yeah, one of the dirty secrets of clinical trials is that patients in those trials are kind of the marathon runners of patients, as you said. It's not reflective of the general population, and certainly of older populations that may not be eligible for the criteria of the trial.
And mostly, there's very few, in the past, very few females as part of those trials.
Yeah, there's a lot of awareness of that now, so I think it's improving, but certainly historically it's been a big problem.
Yep.
Well, Dr. Brad, we wish you much luck. Thank you for returning and giving us an update. We really wish you much success. It's going to be done. I'm guaranteeing. I'm guaranteeing it here on Today. So stay tuned for more Senior Stay or Go TV.
Welcome to Senior Stay or Go TV. Today we have Mary Ball, who is the president and CEO of Alzheimer's San Diego. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Patty.
Mary, thank you for being here today. And before we get started, I must have a shout out to Vicki Mushak for really being the one who brought us together. And I know you're good friends with her, so Vicki, if you're watching, thank you very much.
Yeah, Vicki's great. Thanks, Vicki.
So tell us about Alzheimer's San Diego. And again, in terms of, we hear the word Alzheimer's, but that is really a subset of dementia. And tell us about your organization.
Well, Alzheimer's San Diego is a local independent organization to provide information, support, respite to families who are caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease. And, we read every day in the paper that Alzheimer's is just a skyrocketing epidemic. Just here in San Diego County, we've got over 65,000 people that are suffering from the disease today, and the numbers are just growing. So we're that local organization who provides free services to help families care for the person with memory loss.
So tell us some of the things that Alzheimer's San Diego does for the community, because there's a lot of them.
We offer a wide variety of programs and services. And the first thing that we've got a whole team of master's level social workers who are really experts in Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. And they are available to talk with people on the phone, to get them information, to provide them support, to answer questions. So that's the first service we provide. And we get over 1,000 calls a month from people who just need help, support, and information, because it is such a difficult job caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease. And for the most part, people are cared for at home by family members for the 8 to 10 years that people live with the disease. We also have classes and workshops. Last year we offered close to 300 classes and workshops. They are all free, and they range in topics from what does a diagnosis of Alzheimer's mean, to legal and financial planning, to what's the latest in Alzheimer's research. And so that's something that We touch thousands and thousands of people, providing them information and education on how to care for their loved one. We also have different social programs. We've got painting classes, music classes, exercise classes, and those are available free to people with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers. And then, of course, we have a free respite program because there's so many caregivers out there that they never get a break. And so we've got a team of volunteers, and we can provide 4 hours a week of respite.
Out to the home?
Out to the home, yes.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's just invaluable to caregivers who are taking care of their person 24 hours a day.
Well, and then if they have a loved one and they bring them to the painting class or the dance class or the exercise class, it's socialization, and it also provides a little bit of respite at that time as well. 'Cause
it does.
It is very difficult, because what I found, having had my own personal experience, is it's not the kind of thing you can plan, because you're really not sure what's coming next, because every individual has their journey in a very different way. So you can become educated, but you're not really sure what it is you're going to need.
Right, because the disease is changing all the time, and many people think that it's just a little memory loss, but as you unfortunately know, Alzheimer's starts out as memory loss, and then as the disease progresses through the brain, people lose the ability oftentimes to speak, to eat, to walk, lose the ability to control their emotions. And so it is so challenging for caregivers, and we want to be there for them every step of the way, whether it's with programs or support from our social workers, because it's a difficult job.
So if somebody's kind of wondering about their loved one, is that something that you could help them with? The Alzheimer's San Diego could help them get over that hurdle of denial, or what's the next step?
Sure, we get a lot of calls from people who are worried about themselves, or they're worried about a loved one or a family member. And we can certainly help them identify what's normal memory loss and what are the things that you should be worried about. We also do free memory screenings, and we've got a free memory screening coming up in August that's open to the public, where we've got a team of clinicians from Sharp Healthcare and our master's level social workers, and we can run people through some testing to identify whether there's concerns and whether they should go see a physician for an evaluation. So if people go to our website at alzsd.org, you can get information on our free memory screenings.
You guys have an amazing organization. We took a tour of it about a month or so ago, and really quite impressive for a relatively small staff doing an amazing amount of work. And I congratulate you on that and what you're doing here in San Diego, because it is an epidemic, and there's not a day that goes by there's not something in the newspaper. I mean, I was just watching yesterday the Glenn Campbell situation and things like that. So I congratulate you on everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Have you seen? I mean, you've been involved with this, quite a few years. And have you seen a change in the way people view Alzheimer's and dementia? And do they understand it a little bit more, or is there still a lot of education that needs to be done?
Well, I think that there's still a lot of education that needs to be done. Unfortunately, there's still some stigma around Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, and we're working every day to make sure that people understand what this disease is. Similar how there was stigma around cancer 30, 40 years ago. And just through public education and shows like this, we can educate the community that this is a progressive neurological disease. The brain is physically dying over time, and that's what drives the behaviors and the memory loss. And unfortunately, at this point in time, there's no treatment or a cure. So the best that we can offer is good care and support for families as they take care of their loved one.
So based on that, do you see your typical customer or client who comes in? Is it someone who is beginning to lose cognitive abilities and is concerned, or do you see more crisis where the family kind of didn't really think it was happening or was in denial, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we can't deny it any longer?
Well, it's hard to identify our typical customer. We see the full range, both people who are experiencing memory loss and want to go to a physician, and we talk to people who have recently gotten a diagnosis, because we do have programs for people who are in the early stages of the disease. We are one of the only places in the United States that offers a cognitive stimulation therapy, and it's really for people who are in those very early stages of memory loss. How do we slow the decline? How do we keep their brain engaged and active? Then, of course, we have families who may be in denial about the condition of their loved one and get in a crisis situation. And, of course, we jump right in to help them whatever way we can. Our hope is that people call us and get educated early, because this is a disease. It's a fatal disease. It's going to continue to progress. And it's so much easier if you know what's coming next when you're caring for somebody, because it can present some very challenging circumstances, like wandering.
Yeah.
We've seen, terrible situations when people have wandered with the disease and not been found. So we deal with all kinds of situations. Our hope is if families have any questions, concerns, call us early. We're happy to help.
Are there any charges for the programs? And
all of our programs are free, and we are able to do that by the support of the local community. So we raise every dollar to provide our programs and services, to pay our team of social workers, and the community in San Diego. Our donors have been very generous, and but the need is growing out there, so we continue to need to raise money. And with Alzheimer's San Diego, 100% of the funds raised here in San Diego stay here in San Diego to support our local programs and services. There's national organizations out there that raise money in San Diego, but that money doesn't necessarily stay here to support local families.
so what goes on in San Diego stays in San Diego.
With Alzheimer's San Diego, it certainly does.
Well, Patty and I are part of a team called Lead for the Cure. It's going to be a team, and I know we're early in the game in terms of fundraising, but we hope people will get on the website and go to Lead for the Cure team and put in a donation.
Well, and that's for our walk
October
that's coming up
21st
in October.
in Balboa Park. Yep.
And that's our largest fundraiser, our Walk for Alls. In October, we've got 2 walks, one in Oceanside and one in Balboa Park. So
Right.
thank you for your support.
We're very excited about it.
And the walk is, again, another way that we can provide our services free of charge and actually support local research as well.
Say if somebody wants to volunteer, is that something they can call and find out more information about? Are you accept volunteerism?
At Alzheimer's San Diego, we have hundreds of volunteers, and we put them to work, and we're so grateful for what they do. So if someone is interested in volunteering, go to our website, call our office, and we'd love to talk with them.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I know. We're very excited about what you're doing, because again, Patty, her mom suffered 12 years with the disease, and my Linda, her mom, passed away this year with Alzheimer's.
Sorry.
And what it does to a family is just, it's the worst. It's just because you really, like Patty says, you lose a parent twice, one to Alzheimer's and one to passing.
It's just,
And it's really an unbelievable process.
the emotional toll, the economic toll on families, it's devastating. And at some point in time, we're all going to be touched because the numbers are just too big. We're going to know someone, we're going to have a family member.
Or friends, it's like there's almost a day that doesn't go by that someone doesn't mention something.
Yeah, there's a lot of people impacted, and there's so many people that don't realize that Alzheimer's San Diego is out there. So we always ask for people to spread the word, because people do need help and support, and we want to make sure they know where to go.
Well, we thank you for being here today, Mary. We want to get the word out. We want everybody to get on their website and make a pledge, volunteer, make a phone call.
Come walk with us.
Come walk with us. Come talk to us. So we thank you for being here today, and stay tuned for more Senior Stay or Go TV. Hi, my name is Ron Greenwald, and this is my business partner, Patty Gerke. And we wanted to take this time to first thank everybody for the tremendous support we continue to have with our program, Senior Stay or Go. And we also wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about what Patty and I do for our income during the day, other than we do a lot of senior advocacy, but we are also real estate agents here in San Diego County, working mainly and focused mainly on working with seniors and their families in terms of when it may become time to move mom or dad to a senior community or to downsize them from their home that they lived in for 40 or 50 years. And it's a very emotional process. And we really take pride in the work that we do in helping and supporting our seniors here in San Diego County. So the first question that comes up to us all the time, and I want to ask Patty to answer this, is when do you think is a good time to consult with a real estate agent or a realtor when you're maybe considering a change?
Well, earlier rather than later, because a lot of times, unfortunately, most of our seniors want to stay at home. So they, the saying is, you'll get me out of here in a pine box. But the truth is to have the conversation sooner rather than later, if for no other reason than to make the home they're in safer. So as Ron mentioned, we advocate and educate on behalf of seniors and their family members all the time. And one of the things we do is work with interior designers who specialize in working with seniors and making their homes safe. And it's little things, it's not big things a lot of times that make a huge difference, because you don't want to make big changes. Big changes are hard for them to adapt to. But something as simple as making sure all the light bulbs are working so that they're not trying to get around in a dark space, making sure there aren't any cords that they can trip over or area rugs that they can trip over. Just little simple things like that. So if they're going to stay in their home, they're going to stay there safely, and at least explore the options that are there. So many times families are forced to make a decision when an event occurs, and it's traumatic and it's immediate. And the truth is in today's environment, as the baby boomers age, there are more and more people who are anticipating and being proactive and moving into senior communities. So a lot of communities have waiting lists. So when you are ready, or you need to be ready because of an incident, where you want to be may not be available. So it's important, I think, to get out and see what's out there, see what fits your needs at the moment or what you feel most comfortable with, have meals, meet the people in the community, and then get your name on the waiting list. You can always, when they call you and say, we have something available, you can always say, you know what, I'm not ready, keep me on the list. But it's better to be proactive than reactive.
And that's so true. I mean, it could be a 5 to 10 year process for some people. I mean, and one of the things that we are really adamant about is as people age, we see a lot of deferred maintenance take over the home. Whether they see the deferred maintenance or they don't have the energy to deal with it, they don't have the capacity, some people don't have the capacity to deal with it. And that's really something that we really want to get the family involved with. We want to get what team is surrounding these folks in terms of who is their estate planning attorney, who is their financial advisor, who's really behind supporting this family. Because the beauty of what Patty and I do is we're actually out there visiting with these folks. A lot of the other professionals,
you go
to their office. So we have worked with some seniors 4 to 5 years in making sure before they made that commitment to a change, whether it was downsizing or to a senior community, we would visit them periodically and just help them with safety features within their home. So it's never too early or it can be too late, but it's never really too early just to understand what's out there. And you can make it a fun process. And one of the other things is more and more people are going, I have all of this
stuff.
So talk about that a little bit.
What do we do with all the personal stuff? And it's not even things necessarily that have any financial significance. They could be things as simple as a little gadget that you played with as a child. For me personally, that happened when my grandmother passed away. and it had no financial significance at all, honestly, but it was something that we played with as children, and it was really important to us, and it had a lot of sentimental value. And so many times, you know, people will say, oh, nobody will want any of my stuff, and they'll be very surprised at what people do want, just a little memento or just something to keep in remembrance of somebody who was special in their life. So that's really important as well, and I think people underestimate that sometimes.
And what Patty and I really want everybody to understand is that we really do have the ability to refer you to the leaders in the community that are focused in on whatever area you may need support in.
And assistance.
And assistance. So, I mean, and there's all these terms out there of age, what are they, not geriatric care managers anymore, they're called aging life specialists.
Yes.
I mean, it's aging life specialists, senior move managers, all estate sales people, all of these areas that really can make your life so much more pleasant and comfortable when you have a team around you that's doing right for the senior.
Because it is a process. Moving, period, anytime you move is a process. So if you take it in baby steps because you're proactive instead of reactive, it actually makes it a better experience.
So when it comes back to the question is when is the right time to call us, we'll come out and visit anytime.
Pretty much.
And give you our feedback as to, you know, what are some of the options, and then it's up to you to take it from there.
Exactly. Even just making sure that the smoke detectors in the house are working and there's a carbon monoxide detector in the home. Just safety issues.
A lot of little things get overlooked, and sometimes it doesn't work when the children are telling the parents what to do. So we can be your third party eyes and ears.
Spokesperson.
Spokesperson. We love doing it because we have made a lot of improvements in people's lives just with little changes in the way they walk around the house.
Exactly.
So that answers the question. Thank you, Patty.
Well, the other question is, of course, we have situations where the parents have passed away or a loved one has passed away, and the successor trustee, children, whoever it may be, family member, family friend, is left with getting a phone call saying, guess what, you're in charge of this person's estate, so now what do you do? And that's very different when mom or dad are still living in their home and you're trying to make them safe or assist them in downsizing or moving to a senior community.
Yeah.
So how is that different?
Oh, they're both highly charged, they're both highly emotional, but obviously we're dealing with someone who's passed away, and we're dealing usually with the children or even the grandchildren of that person who's passed away. So it's a very emotional time for the family, and a lot of times everything is just left in that house and nothing's been touched. And again, if the family's all on the same page, then that's one area. If the family is not all on the same page, which is about a 50-50, you have to be very careful with the personal property. So a lot of times Patty and I will be asked to, I know this sounds, we'll just have to tell it like it is, we have to go and change the locks on the home so that one of the heirs is not in there taking all the personal property without authority. So it's being a successor trustee is a very, very time-consuming, big job. It's filled with pitfalls about fiduciary responsibility, money accounting, property accounting. And so again, how does that impact us is that we're part of that overall process. So we have to be very aware of who's in charge, and are you really in charge? You may think you're in charge, but no, this paperwork doesn't give you authority to do squat. So
was there even a trust, or is the property now in probate?
Right.
Does it need to go to court?
Right. So a lot of time we have comments where the children have called the neighbor who happens to be a real estate agent who has no understanding of the process, and they put the home on the market to find out the home was not in a trust, that it has to go through a probate process, and yet you really can't sell that home. And then in terms of the personal property, what Patty and I do is we will project manage the process, again, of the distribution of personal property. selling the real estate is one thing. The distribution of the personal property is a whole nother area of what we will help the family do. So that's a big change. Getting the home ready for sale. Does the family want to, spruce up the home a little bit so that they can
Does it need it?
Does it need it? Do they want to do it? Is there income to do it? What is the cost to do it? And again, many times the children don't want to take on that role for emotional reasons, for they don't live in San Diego, whatever the case may be, busy schedules. So we project manage it. We obviously don't actually physically do the work, but we know the people.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah, we've done a few vacuum jobs. So it's meeting meeting expectations. I mean, we've had situations where there's multiple children who have multiple spouses, and everybody wants to be part of this process. And Patty and I are really experts in bringing the open communications and the open dialogue as to what to do.
Keeping everybody on board.
Yeah, what would you add to that?
Pretty much just communication is key, so that no one feels like they're being left out or decisions are being made without their consideration. I think that's the real key.
Yeah, it's a very process that takes a lot of time in the sense of patience and encouragement
And
understanding to do what's right for the family. Because again, they've lost their mom, they've lost their dad, they've lost a loved one, and we are very sensitive to that space. And the sense of we don't go in, hey, great, let's sell the house. We're going to go, well, what is it that you want to accomplish here before we think about selling the house? So, what else?
I think that pretty much covers it. Just ask the right questions, understand the situation, understand the emotions, and understand that it's a process for everybody, and everybody processes at a different rate and in a different way. So you just have to be very aware.
And that is Ron Greenwald and Patty Gerke with Senior Stay or Go, and we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our advocacy on behalf of seniors.
Good morning. Today it is my honor to introduce Paul Greenwood. He is the Deputy District Attorney here at the San Diego Attorney's Office, and he has been the lead prosecutor for elder abuse for over 20 years now. So we have a lot to talk about today, Paul.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us today. And before we get into the questions, we want to talk about Moom.
Yes.
How is that, am I saying? How's she doing? And tell us about that story a little bit.
Yeah, well, a lot of the reason why I've been doing this kind of work for over 20 years is because of my parents. And sadly, I lost my dad, who was 92, about 20 months ago to advanced Alzheimer's, leaving my mother as a widow, who's still amazing me every day at age 93. She lives alone in the town that I grew up in south of England. But the one thing I pledged to her several years ago when Dad eventually moved into a nursing home was that I would stay in touch with her every single day, wherever possible. So at first, Ron, I would phone her every day from here back to England. But for the last 18 months, thanks to the wonders of technology with iPads, and I purchased her a mini iPad. For the last 18 months, I've been FaceTiming my mother every single morning.
Awesome.
Isn't that fabulous?
And I really try to endorse that wherever I go and encourage people of my age with an elderly parent living away from them to stay in touch as frequently as they can. Because as you know, you hear so many stories of people being ripped off, but one of the reasons why they do get ripped off is because their own children have abandoned their responsibility. You know?
They live in isolation.
They do.
In isolation.
And the predators seem to know exactly, instinctively, who to target when they suspect that somebody is living in an isolated bubble and they can move in on that person.
Well, let's talk about the news of October 2016, where you announced a big arrest of some scammers. Tell us about that and how that came about.
Yes, the DA's office had our own October surprise. Yeah, it was good. And it's something that we had to keep under wraps for a long time. How this all came to us was that a former colleague of mine, a former prosecutor, Jim Baker, came to me about 2 years ago, very upset, I could tell something was wrong, and he said, I've just discovered that my mother, of all people, who was 86 at the time, has become the victim of the grandma scam. And I mean, we've heard of that, how the crooks portray themselves as the grandson. I'm in jail, and in this instance, he portrayed himself as being in jail in Peru, and she believed it, and then they worked the scam to the point where she ended up driving all around the county of San Diego, something which she never would have done otherwise, purchasing what we call green dot prepaid cards to the tune of $65,000, believing that this was going to help her grandson get out of jail, get out of Peru, and get back to his Coast Guard officer job on the East Coast of America. So when Jim, my friend, found out about it, he was not only just shocked that his mother could fall for it, but also determined to do something about it. So he came to me, I got my office to agree that we should investigate it. And thanks to the amazing work of one of our investigators, he systematically, for about 15 months, tracked all the money, but in doing so, uncovered a labyrinth of a worldwide network of crooks who were doing all this scamming, whether it be the grandma scam, the IRS scam, the jury duty scam, and ultimately it all pointed back to a boiler room in India. So what happened 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston announced this indictment of all these suspects, including our suspect from Riverside County, as one of 52 people. And when they did their press conference, I went to Bonnie Dimonetati and I said, I really think we should do our own press conference just to educate the folks here in San Diego that it can happen to us, but also to give kudos to our own investigator for doing a tireless work for so many months.
Well, congratulations, and hopefully it puts a dent.
A little dent.
We hope so, yes, because that suspect was arrested in Riverside and is now being transported back to Houston, where he will face charges with all the others. And because it's federal, because it crosses state and national lines, the exposure is far greater than what we could have done for him.
Well, congratulations on
That's
pursuing.
awesome.
Thank you.
So there are a number of scams, as you mentioned a few.
Yes.
Do these scams all have something in common that people can watch for or listen for? Or?
They do, and primarily it's the weapon of choice is the phone, the telephone, and the trademark is something's going to happen to you or to your family member if you don't do what we need you to do, which is pay money. And it's always somebody pretending to be either a family member or someone in a position of authority, as a sergeant from the sheriff's department or the jury commissioner or the IRS, claiming that you're going to be arrested. And the common denominator is they send out all these phone calls to thousands and thousands of people every day. And of course, many of those fall upon an elderly person living alone at home. And this phone call comes as a bolt out of the blue, and they panic. And they don't turn to anybody, because another denominator is that the crooks will often tell them, don't tell anybody, this has to be done quickly, it has to be done in secret, because otherwise something bad can happen to either you or your family member. So without thinking, they are paralyzed into fear. And the other common denominator is the type of transfer of how the money gets from the victim to the suspects. It's typically either through a green dot prepaid debit card, which you can purchase at Walmart or
and
CVS.
And you can't really trace, right?
Which you can't trace. Or now, because the crooks realize that we're onto them with the green dot cards, they're asking people to go and purchase iTunes, Apple cards of all things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because you scratch that off the back and they have 14 digits. And as long as you pass those 14 digits on, that can be downloaded anywhere in the world.
Oh my gosh.
And then those crooks use those to purchase iPads or whatever it is and then sell them on the open market.
And I just want you to stress that this doesn't have to be a senior with limited capacity or anything like that. It could be anybody.
Well, that's precisely right. You know, because I think our profile is, oh, it's somebody with advanced dementia. No, we've had professionals. I mean, Jim Baker's own mother, the one I talked about at the beginning of this interview, very smart lady, a retired teacher. She had all her wits about her. The one thing was she loves her grandson dearly. And that's what these predators thrive upon, is that emotional attachment, telling you that unless you do something, your grandson is going to be in danger. And once you hear that, logic disappears, you know.
So what is the lessons that we can learn from this? And I know you have something called the top 10 tips. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, looking at it from the perspective of a child, an adult son or daughter, if you have an elderly parent living alone, that in itself is a red flag, because we've got to wake up and realize that our elderly parent is today a sitting target. And that's why I stay in touch with my mother every single day, because of what I've learned over 20 years is that there are people out there who will wake up this morning and go, how can I rip off Mrs. Greenwood? You know, I mean, that's exactly what's going on. So we've built up these top 10 tips, and many of them are designed to make not just the adult children aware, but also the elderly people aware. And I'm not trying to make people paranoid, but I'm simply trying to raise the awareness out there that unfortunately the days when a handshake was good enough, when the warm, nice, emotional, kind, welcoming voice on the telephone was a nice thing to have happen to you. No, those days are gone. And unfortunately, we have to teach ourselves to be skeptical about everyone and everything that either phones us, sends us a letter, or knocks on the door. And those top 10 tips are based around that kind of attitude.
Scary.
Scary. I mean, for example, many of us, we may be faced with choosing a caregiver, right, at some point for a loved one. Well, you just don't go to Craigslist anymore. You don't go to the ads in the newspaper anymore. You have to go through a bonded, insured agency. And even though people tell me, but Mr. Greenwood, those cost more. Yeah, but you know what? You get what you pay for. And if you don't do that, then the chances are you're opening up to hiring a convicted felon. Yeah.
And or even putting yourself at risk by not having the appropriate insurance for those people to be on the property. And
see, that's
workman's comp. I mean, the whole laundry
exactly
list.
Right.
It just explodes.
It explodes. You're so right. And these crooks, for example, unlicensed contractors, if we hire somebody who's not licensed and then they trip and fall and they don't have workers' comp, they may turn around and sue you for allowing them onto your property. So.
Yep. So if someone in my family or a dear friend my mother-in-law's gotten the calls. Fortunately, she's been a little tricky herself in that she's gotten the grandma call, I'm in jail, and she'll say, who is this? And the other end of the phone said, well, it's your grandson. And she said, well, which one?
Good.
And then he hung up on her.
Of course. Yes.
Because she's not on Facebook, so we couldn't get a name from Facebook for her. But I'm sure there are a lot of grandparents who are on Facebook to keep up with their grandkids, and so that information is pretty easily accessible. And so someone could call and say, you know, it's your grandson Joe, and then it becomes much more believable. So what advice would you give to someone, like you said, who's so vulnerable, especially a grandmother to a grandchild? Right,
right. I just want to reassure people that, for example, the IRS, police, jails, they don't operate by phoning you and saying, hey, you need to send money. We just don't do it that way, thankfully, in the United States of America. It doesn't work that way. Only crooks work that way. So if you do get a call, be very skeptical anyway. And I always tell people, use caller ID, use your message machine. Don't automatically pick up the phone and answer it unless you know who's calling you. And if you don't recognize the number, why don't you let it go to message? Because if it is urgent, if it is important, they'll leave a message for you. And then, of course, if they leave a message which sounds a little suspicious, then do your due diligence and check with your neighbor, with your family, with somebody else that you trust, and say, look, I've had this call, what do you think? And 9 times out of 10, it's bogus, and you should leave it alone.
Well, and if you have a message on your machine, is that something that's even more traceable?
Yes, I mean, that's always good, because I'm always willing to receive those messages from the public, because then I get the phone numbers, I record them, and then and sometimes on a quiet morning, I will make that call myself, because I want to educate myself by talking to these crooks. And I've talked to so many of these crooks on the phone. I've recorded their messages as well, because I want to learn what script they use, what methods they use. And so I let them take me down the path to see how far they go with it before I drop the brick on them by saying, oh, by the way, this is the San Diego DA's office. Yeah.
Well, being in the holiday season as we are, is there a spike in any particular scam? I mean, the IRS is more only a March and April scam, I assume.
Right.
Is there a spike of any type of scam that we can advise them on in November, December?
Not really. These phone calls and these scams occur all year round. But what does happen more often in the holiday season is, unfortunately, your personal safety is compromised with identity theft. We're all very distracted, aren't we, in the holiday season? And one thing I'm constantly telling elderly, particularly female consumers, is when you go out shopping, and you're going and you're thinking 100 miles an hour of what I need to buy, you get distracted very quickly. The predators are out there looking for your purse sitting in the top part of that cart, and they will distract you very quickly, and they work in pairs, and they'll unzip your purse and remove your wallet. And by the time you get to the checkout lane and realize your wallet's missing,
It's too late.
it's too late. They've long gone, and you know what? They've already gone to the gas station to fill up with gas. They're so quick with these things. So that's what I always tell people at holiday season: be much more aware of your surroundings and of your personal belongings, and try not to get too distracted, because the predators are going to be out there in the shopping malls.
What relationship should the consumer have, the elderly and the adult child have with the bank and the credit unions today?
Great point, Ron. And number one, I really urge these financial institutions to take their responsibilities much more seriously about their obligations to the banks. Call them customers, right? And the credit unions call them members, because those financial institutions are indeed financially mandated reporters of suspected financial elder abuse. And some institutions, banks and credit unions, do a fabulous job of training their staff to look out. So, for example, victims of the grandma scam or the IRS scam who believe that they need to go to the bank or the credit union and withdraw $5,000 in cash. Now, I'm not being personal here, but when was the last time you and I withdrew $5,000 in cash from any financial institution? I can't think of a time when I ever have. And so any time that happens with an 85-year-old lady walking in asking for $5,000 in cash, or a man, that should immediately put the teller on an alert. And that needs training. So they need to then bring the customer or the member into a private office, sit them down, which is what happened in Jim Baker's mother's case. Finally, the bank sat her down and asked her, has anyone called you? Has anyone said your grandson is in jail? And then that's when it all came to light. We need more bank tellers, more credit union tellers to be taking that responsibility and doing that. So I think institutions need to realize what their responsibility is, and to be on the lookout much more for irregularities in the banking of their older customers.
And Paul, you traveled the world getting this message out. What words of pearls of wisdom, words of wisdom can you want to convey to the audience today that hopefully can put another dent into this?
Be proactive is my key. If your gut tells you that either your mother or father or an elderly grandparent or a neighbor down the street is acting differently, there's a shift in their behavior, because that's what one thing Jim Baker on the grandma scam says to me: Paul, I should have realized my mother was covering up on something, because her whole daily routine was changing. And she was covering up to explain why she wasn't home at a certain time of day or night, because she was driving all the way up to Fallbrook to purchase these green dot cards, because the crooks were telling her go to different places. If you see a change in that person's behavior, let your gut tell you that's something wrong, and don't be afraid to call Adult Protective Services. We're going to have a number put up there. It's 1-800-510-2020. And unless you are a mandated reporter, you can remain anonymous. And nobody's going to criticize you for making that call. Nobody's going to say, why are you wasting our time? No, I would never say that. So that's my first thing. Go with your gut and be proactive. And secondly, for those adult sons and daughters out there, be more involved in your parents' lives. Stay in touch. Stay in touch if your parents will allow you to. And then thirdly, if you're an older adult, 65 or older, be street smart, be savvy, ask more questions, and don't always react immediately to a phone call, to a letter. Always check with a loved one, with a professional advisor, check with somebody that you trust and who you respect before you ever commit to anything that's going to cost you money.
Thank you for that. And most important, where do you get to spend Christmas this year?
Well, we're going to be here in San Diego.
Oh.
And sadly, not with the grandkids. They were with us last year. But thankfully, our daughter and son-in-law who live in England have promised our twin granddaughters, when they turn 5 in February, then they'll come out hopefully for Easter or maybe in the summer. But we will be here. But I always go and try and make a visit to my mum straight after Christmas because my mum thankfully spends Christmas with my older sister, who's very, very good about making sure that Mum's not alone. And then I try to be there in the new year sometimes. So I'll spend a few days with my mum in early January.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you for being here today. I hope this message gets to everybody around the country because it's such an important issue and it's growing epidemically every day, as we know.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank you both because this is so important to get the word out there through the media. I can't spend my time going around to various places all the time. I need to be in court prosecuting the bad guys. So the message to get out there is so, so important. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Our pleasure.
Thank
Our
you.
pleasure.
And stay tuned for more Senior Stay or Go TV. Hi, my name is Ron Greenwald, and welcome to Senior Stay or Go TV. This is my business partner, Patty.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Good.
Great. This morning we wanted to address, we are thrilled to let you know that we are entering our 2nd year of production on Senior Stay or Go TV, and we have brought over 50 segments to the public eye on a variety of topics. So today we wanted to kind of do a little bit of recap of our thrill of the past year and where we plan to go in for the future. Patty, so we've done over 50 segments. I mean, we can't go through every one of them, but
No, there's
give me,
too many.
You know, in your mind, what stands out over the past 12 months?
Well, for me, if I'm going to pick 4 that kind of stood out, although there's more than 4 truly that stood out, Go Go Grandparent with Justin Bogart was so much fun because he brought his grandma on and they were absolutely adorable. And I love the fact that he said his title was Executive Grandson. Then we had Paul Greenwood, our Deputy District Attorney, on, and Paul's always, always so awesome to listen to. I could listen to him for hours.
And his talk is on scams.
Right, right, for seniors.
Right. How
So-
to help the senior not get taken.
Right. So he's tons of knowledge and just awesome to listen to. And then Dr. James Brewer from UCSD, the Alzheimer's research that's being done there, and the amount of research that's being done and the continual need for people to sign up to be a part of the research. So I think it was really important to get that word out there that there's a lot being done. We're still probably 5 to 10 years away, but if people don't sign up to be part of the research, it's going to be that much longer and that much harder to actually try and find a cure. And then my other one that was really fun for me to do was the table setting for the holidays, to really make a senior feel comfortable at the dinner table so that they're not feeling like they can't pick up a cup because it's too delicate and too difficult for them to pick up, to have a mug in place.
I want to thank everybody for their support over the last year. It's just been a tremendous learning experience for both Patty and I. We are thrilled with the people we've met. We are going to be thrilled with the people we're going to meet. And we want to thank the entire staff here of Senior Stay or Go for just being so supportive of everything we do and getting us through the first year, and we're very excited about year number 2. So stay tuned for more Senior Stay or Go TV.